All right, here we go. Here we go. If view transitions and scroll-driven animations had a baby, this is us today. Yeah, 25 April 25, which is very coincidentally, if that's the correct word. It's my Google anniversary as well. Today marks my second anniversary at Google in my role as Chrome DevRel. So yeah, I'm still here and I'm still enjoying it. I'm very happy to see Adam here on the stream as well, one of my colleagues, and together with him and Yuna, we make up the Web UI and the Web UI and CSS DevRel team. So if you have any questions about CSS or not specifically about scroll-driven animations or view transitions, but like more CSS in general, feel free to ask. And if I don't know the answer, maybe Adam knows the answer. And if he doesn't know the answer, well, then maybe we can point you in the right direction at least, where you hopefully can find the answer. So that's a bit of the intro that I did here. So my name is Bramus, Chrome DevRel. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Mastodon, and I also run my blog, as Shep already mentioned. And it's been around since 2001, so that's 23 years and counting. I'm very, very, very proud of that. Today I want to talk about this. You most likely have seen this demo already because it's like the poster child demo for view transitions. It was built by Maxi Ferreira, and it's so amazing. It's this web page. It is a music playlist, and it has. Let me just move this to this screen so that I see it myself. Yeah, and it has these several views on there. Where if you go from the overview page to the detailed page, it has these like nice and rich transitions as you go from the one view to the other. Um, it's so cool. I could watch this all day all day long. And how he built it? Well, he built this using view transitions. View transitions, a feature that's available in Chrome since version 111, and it's also available in Safari Technology Preview nowadays. So if you download Safari Technology Preview, which is the preview version of Safari, you can already try it out today. There's still some work that they have to do to get it 100% right, but it's really great to see this because this like indicates that well, this year Safari most likely is going to ship Vue transitions. I'm quite sure of it. Now, to be clear, Vue transitions. How Maxi built his demo, he built it using same document view transitions for single page applications. It's one and the same document that is getting updated, so it's not a cross document navigation, which is something that we are working on in Chrome and hope to ship soon. But this here was built using same document view transition. So the app that you see there is an SPA. It's not an MPA. And what this View Transition API does, well, it allows you to create animated visual transitions, such as the one that we have seen between two states. And looking at that demo, well, I recognize these two states. You have the overview state and you have the detail state. And then when you click on it, it like nicely transitions from the one view to the other, thanks to this View Transition API. To do this yourself, there's 3 steps that you need to do. And step 1 is, well, you need to identify and name all the pieces that you want to see move around on the screen. Identifies, you look at the picture and you say, this is this and that is that. And then you name them, you give them a name, and you do that using the view transition name property in CSS. So looking at these 2 states, well, you can see, okay, there on the left, this black thing with photo in, that's the card, right? That's called just the card. And then on the right, well, we have the same thing. That's also the card. It's just a bit bigger and stuff has moved around in it, but on both views, that's the card. Looking further, oh, there on the left, we have the cover or the photo, the cover photo. Well, on the right, we have it there as well. And yes, it's a bit bigger there on the right, and it's still anchored to the bottom of the thing, but it's the same cover thing. We also have the controls, and then on the right we also have the controls. And here, like for example, you see a real difference. On the left, the controls only has a play button, one to the left and one to the right. And then in the detail view or the detail state, it has extra buttons in there, but it's still the thing with the controls that's there on the page. And then we continue. Oh, we have a title there. We have an avatar. We have a button, and so on and so on and so on. And then we also, on the right there, we have something that's not on the left. So in the detail page, we have this description highlighted in blue, but we don't have it in the overview page. Furthermore, we also have this back button there on the detail view, not on the overview. And then turning back to the overview, we also have another thing there, which is the top bar, because that also moved around. If you paid close attention to the animation, you see like the top bar moved out of view as you went from the overview page to the detail page. So we've done part of this step, right? We've identified all the parts that we want to move around, and then we need to name them. And we do that in CSS using the view transition name property, and it accepts a custom ident. A custom ident is a set of characters that you use to identify the thing. You could see it as a string, but it's technically it's not a string. But you put things in there, words in there. For example, for the card, well, on our overview page and on our detail page, that was a .card element. We give it a view transition name of card. Do note that the selectors on both states don't need to be the same, so they can be different elements. So for example, the title that we identified in the markup of the overview page, that was an H2, but in the markup of the detail page, that's an H1. So we give it the same view transition name, knowing that only one will exist at the same time. So only either you get the overview page with the H2, or you get the detail page with the H1, and you say that one's a title and that one's a title as well. With all these names set up, so we do that for all the things that we identified. With all this set up, we call the view transition API. And that's a function that is called document.start view transition, and in there you pass in a function that updates the DOM somehow. So in my case, for example, in Maxi's case, in this demo, if we click on the card, then we want to show the playlist. So this is our click handler that we typically have to do that. If you want to add a view transition to it, it's as easy as wrapping that update thing in document.start view transition. And then for browsers that don't support document.start view transition, we had a little fallback there. So if you don't speak view transitions as a browser, we just show you the playlist. Otherwise, we show you the playlist wrapped in document.start view transition, which starts the view transition and does all sorts of magic that I will explain later on. And then we can use a bit of CSS or a lot of CSS to customize the animation if you want to. I won't go into detail right now, more on that later. Now you might be wondering, like, what type of sorcery is this? Like this document.start view transition, like what's going on? You just put your update method in there and then it happens? The answer is yes, it is a bit of sorcery. So let's look at a more simple example. Because with the demo, the playlist demo, there's a lot of things going on. Let's look at a more simple demo, one that I created for last year's CSS Day edition. I hope to see you at this year's edition, by the way. And something fell over, no worries. So this is a demo here where I have a page. It's showing a sentence, and every time I click on the document, the sentence changes to a new sentence. The JavaScript to do this is basically this. I have a next sentence method that updates the DOM with the new sentence, and I have wrapped that in document.start view transition, which is linked to an onClick handler. So let's look into detail what happens here whenever I do that. Let's look at this code. So I have my page. It's running at 60 frames per second because that's what my device does. It might be 120 frames or whatever, but like the page is constantly updating and showing me all the things on screen. I come along with my mouse. Not that mouse, I come along with my mouse, and then I click on the document, and the click handler gets executed. So at the top there, document.start view transition, that's a function that needs to be executed. At that moment, the browser goes, oh, document.start view transition, it's snapshot time. I need to take a snapshot of all the stuff that's on the page right there. So it does that, it captures a snapshot, and it stores it in memory for later use. When that's done, the snapshot has been taken, it moves on, it pauses rendering, first of all. So everything that's about to happen now, you as a user, you don't get to see it. It happens underneath the covers, under the hood. So it moves on to the next sentence method that needs to be executed. The next sentence method, well, that one will update the sentence that's on the screen. But again, you as a user, you don't see this. You still see the old sentence on the screen. This happens under the hood. After that has been done, so after the DOM has been updated, the browser goes, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a new snapshot. It captures a new snapshot, and it stores it in memory. So we have these two snapshots right here. We have a snapshot of the old state, and then we have a snapshot of the new state. And what the browser then does is it positions these on top of each other. Rendering still paused at this very moment. Then it resumes rendering back at my 60 frames per second, and then it will transition from that old snapshot to that new snapshot using a default fade in, fade out animation. So that's the core concept behind view transitions. You have these snapshots that get taken, and then the browser does a fade with it. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, like, but how? Because I explained the what. I didn't explain how the browser knows what to snapshot and what to do. Well, how is because of a CSS instruction. It's a CSS instruction that's part of the user agent style sheet. The user agent style sheet, that's a style sheet that comes with the browser, and it differs from browser to browser. So, for example, this is in Chrome's user agent style sheet. It's soon going to be also in Safari's user agent style sheet once they ship view transitions. But this is, for example, not present in Firefox's user agent style sheet because they don't support it yet. So this is part of the user agent style sheet. By the way, you can find a bunch of other things in there. Like, for example, text needs to be 16 pixels by default, times in Roman, the text is black, the background is white. That's all stuff that goes in the user agent style sheet. So this is in there. This view transition name thing is in there, and it gives it a name. It says the root element, which is the HTML element. You get the view transition name root. And that's the cue for the browser to take that snapshot. It says, okay, whenever you call document.start view transition, I need to snapshot that thing before and after, an old snapshot and a new snapshot. So we end up with these two right here, these two snapshots of that root element. And what the browser then does with these snapshots, it gives them a name. It says like, hey, you know what? The thing there on the left, that's the view transition old thing. That's the old snapshot. And then the thing on the right is the view transition new. It renders it in a pseudo, and it also gets that name because that was the value that we had there for the view transition name. Well, that gets repeated here. And then these two things, these get constructed in a tree of pseudo elements. And this tree of pseudo elements, it starts with the view transition pseudo element. That one gets injected on top of the thing where you called start view transition on. So for now, that's document.start view transition. So it's on the root that we say, basically. It's on the document, but we render it on the root. In the future, hopefully this year, maybe next year, we would like to ship like per element view transition, where you can say like this element dot start view transition, and then this group of pseudos, this pseudo tree would get injected on that specific element. But for now, it's only on the root element. Yes, these are like a lot of pseudo elements that get constructed, and they each have their own meaning and purpose. So this view transition pseudo element, that's the overlay on top of the transition root. So that's the layer that goes on top of all the stuff that's underneath, on top of your document. And then, well, we recognize the old snapshot, that's the one that fades out. The new snapshot, that's the one that fades in. And then we also have the image pair, which is for blend mode isolation, because the fade in, fade out by default happens using plus lighter blend mode, and in the future plus darker for dark mode websites, but that's not shipping yet. But we need to isolate this blend mode so that only these two layers participate in the fade in, fade out, in the blending, and not the layers underneath. And then we also, as a last pseudo, we have the view transition group, which is responsible for the position and size, but more on that later. So only focus right now on this old and new, and then the view transition, the overlay, those are the really relevant here. If you can't really follow here, because this is all text, like what does this look like in the browser? Well, here's a visualization. So we have the fade in and the fade out going on, but if I show you this in 3D, you can see the view transition overlay, that one gets layered on top of your document. Then you have the group, you have the image pair in there, and then you have the old and the new that are fading from the one to the other. So let's wait a little bit to show it again. Yeah, there you see it. The old and the new, these are fading. Now this fade, you might be wondering like, okay, but why does it fade? Like who says that it needs to fade? Well, again, this is part of the user agent style sheet. in the user agent style sheet, next to that view transition name root that we saw before, you also have all these rules right here. And it says, you know what, the group, you have this animation, and we see there at the bottom the last two rules. The old one uses a fade out, and the new one uses a fade in. And yes, these are CSS animations, like I mentioned before, which is interesting because if this is CSS, then I, as an author, I can put in my style sheets, in my author style sheet, something like this. All view transition groups, so the asterisk in there says like all view transition groups that are getting created, you animate over a duration of 2 seconds. And just like that, I have already customized this view transition, because you can see it now runs much, much slower. This then allows more stuff, right? Because this is CSS, so I can roll my own animation, like I can provide my own keyframes, like a scale up and scale down one. Or I can even combine it with the user agent provided fade in and fade out one. And well, yes, that's possible, because if I just add this little piece of CSS to my view transition logic, well, to my style sheet, then my view transition suddenly looks like this. And I think that's really nice. A few lines of CSS to customize how the view transition works. Do note though, before you go all crazy with this, you go like, oh, whoa, I can change a lot of things. Do note though, that these snapshots are nothing but pixels on a screen. These snapshots are replaced content, because the browser takes the snapshots and then it renders them in those pseudo elements on top of your document. Think of it as looking through your phone, right? When you want to make a photo. The thing that you see on the glass on the screen of your phone is a representation of the real world. It's not the real world. The real world is behind your phone, but what you see on your phone, that's like a representation. It's only pixels. So that means that you can't unfortunately do this. You can't say, hey, on the old snapshot, I want the text to be red. That won't work, because it's not real text. It's a screenshot of the text. The same thing with the new one. Like if you want to access the custom property --i, which was declared on the original element, well, you can't access it, because you are working with that pseudo element, which is just a bunch of pixels that represent the original element. One thing that's interesting though is that while this old snapshot is a photo, a screenshot, the new snapshot is a live view. It's still flattened as pixels, but it's a live view. And you can see this in the demo by Maxi. So this is normal one, but pay attention to the video that's playing. If you click on it, the video keeps on playing as you have the view transition going on, where the box grows. As the view transition is going from the one view to the other, the video keeps on playing, and that's because it's a live snapshot. It's so powerful stuff. Yeah, let's take a look at another demo. This is a demo made by Adam, where he changes the alignment of a grid, where you say like, okay, now the box in there, so the body has a display grid, and then the box goes on the right or on the left, top of the bottom. So every time you click it, these properties are changed. And this is the code that Adam has. So it's basically the same logic as the demo that I showed you with the text. Every time you click on the body, you check those documents of sort view transition exist. Nope. Well, then just set the random alignments. If it does exist, wrap that set random alignments, wrap that in document.start view transition. And then the random position is start and center. So the box then gets repositioned. And you see this fade in, fade out as you click around. So let me replay that video. Yes, so as you click, you see it fading from its old position to its new position. And that is because, well, I've mentioned before, in our user agent style sheet, we have this view transition name that says the root element, you get a view transition name of root. Now, since this is a CSS property, I, as an author, like I, as a web developer, I can also use this, right? And so I could name the box. And that's exactly what Adam has done here. In this demo, he says, you know what, the box, you get a view transition name of box. And this is the part where stuff gets getting really cool, because look at it now. As you click around, the box transitions from its old position to its new position. And that's so cool about view transitions. How it works behind the scenes is that, remember our pseudo tree that gets constructed for that snapshot of the root thing? Well, now we have basically two snapshots. We have the root one that was captured, but we also have the box that was getting captured. So you have an individual layer of the white background, and you have an individual layer of that little blue box, just that little blue box that gets rendered on top of our view transition overlay. Remember when I said, hey, this view transition group, that's the one that's responsible to position everything on the screen? Well, that's what's causing the movement here. The root element, it has the same size in the old snapshot and in the new snapshot, so you don't really see it move around. But that little box, originally it was at the center, and then later on it was at the bottom right. So it's like, oh no, this whole group, I'm going to move it to the right, and then I'm going to move it to the left and move it around on the screen. So that's that group thingy that's moving around. Visualized again, this is how it works. So you see the box move. I also changed the color here to make it visually interesting. So we have these two separate groups, and it's the group one that's moving as you run the view transition, and then it's again the old and the new one that's fading in, fading out, and so on and so on and so on. If you don't believe me, I added a little outline to everything. Like here I am adding a hot pink outline to each group. I am also changing the background color to really show you what's going on. At this point, it's a bit stupid though that the background is crossfading from the old to the new one. Like the root element itself isn't really doing anything. It's only the box that should move. So we can optimize this page by saying, hey, you know what, root element, I'm giving you a view transition name of none. And none says you have no view transition name. You are removing the view transition name, the one that was in the user agent style sheet. And that way it doesn't get captured when you call document.start view transition. So this is the result here. Only the box itself is moving. The background layer, that one didn't get captured in the snapshot. So you just see it rendered underneath. So that's our pseudo tree here. Do note though, maybe I'm not sure if I have it in this demo. Like if I click, yeah, and if I click the page again, like I'm nicely waiting to click again every time the view transition has ended. But if a view transition is running and you like rage click the page, we've all been there, right? Like clicking the page and then click again. And it doesn't work when a view transition is running. And that's because this overlay, this view transition pseudo, that one is caching all the clicks. So the event listener that Adam has in his code, document.body add event listener click, and which I also had in my demo, which changes the text, it can't be executed because this overlay thingy is caching all the clicks. CSS to the rescue, right? We have a property for it. Pointer events. You can say, hey, you know what? You view transition roots pseudo there, you overlay, you don't get any pointer events. And at that point, if we click while a view transition is running, we click on that pseudo, but it doesn't process the click. It says just fall through to the document underneath, and then our document again can handle our clicks as we have instructed it through JavaScript. So this is an updated demo. I click on the page, it moves, and while it is running, I click, and I can keep on clicking, click. One thing you notice though here is that a view transition, while it is running, it can be interrupted when starting a new one. So only one view transition can run at the same time. And to be clear, there's one view transition that can transition multiple elements at the same time, but they're all part of the one view transition. So all these snapshots, they are all part of the one view transition that's running. And what you see here is really interesting because interrupted view transitions, they skip to the end. So you have document.start view transition. While it's running, you start a new one. The old one skips to the end. This is something that we hope to look into maybe later, so that you have retargetable view transitions. So it would be cool, right? So as the box is moving to the right, so that's left on your screen because we're getting mirrored here to the camera. So if I say right, I should do this, right? And so as the box is moving and you click again, it should like retarget and then move and swirl around. That would be so cool. But right now, that's unfortunately not possible. So this is our pseudo tree. I told you the view transition overlay, that one that catches all the clicks. Do note though that the groups they also catch the clicks and they can't be disabled. And this is for security reasons. For example, if you have a button that submits a form and you are moving the thing on the screen, well, you don't want to click the button as it is moving, because the button can exist, for example, on the old snapshot, but not on the new one. So as it is fading out, if you click it, nothing can really happen. And so you are not allowed to disable the clicks on the view transition groups. They will still capture the clicks, but you can disable the clicks on the view transition overlay on that one. So that was the theory of view transition. I hope that was a bit clear. All together now, what can you do with this? Well, again, a demo by Adam. Remember, I forgot the name. Oh, it's on screen. It's Isotope, where you can like filter through these items. Well, with view transitions, you can now do that. Every time you click on one of the inputs, you prevent the default, so it doesn't get checked. You then do document.start view transition, and in there, in that function, you say, oh, input, you are checked after all, or unchecked after all. And then, because every element here has a unique view transition name and some extra animations on there, like you see the linear easing that was used to have this motion effect. Oh, it's so cool. It's so cool. It's so cool. Here's another demo, animated CSS grids. Well, you can do that with view transitions. So here, for example, I'm changing the grid gap, I am changing the number of columns, or I'm changing how many cells a certain cell spans, like a certain element spans. You wrap that in document.start view transition, and you get this. I think this is really, really cool. Another thing, this is a demo I built as well, where you have this accordion, where if you open up an element, it nicely transitions. And you can see here that like the small text transitions into the big text, and then the description comes along. So that's all things you can do with it. And of course, well, the demo that I've already shown you by Maxi Ferreira, wonderful demo, the poster child demo for view transitions. That one is also built with it. Yeah. So that's same document view transitions for single page applications. Here's an article written by Jake Archibald, who was like one of the original people behind view transitions to make sure that we got this. So if you ever run into Jake Archibald, just say thank you for making that we have view transitions. Like he's so responsible for this, and it's a good thing. It's so amazing. So yeah, that's view transitions. What many people don't know about the demo that Maxi built is that he built it after this concept. It's a concept by Ehsan Rahimi. I mispronounced that. But what's cool is that it has a second part, which is here. So he doesn't only do the view transition from the overview page to the detail page, like we see here, but there's a second part going on. It shows here, yeah, like if he clicks and drags, then the full card also becomes smaller and stuff moves around. And at that point, I'm like, oh, I know this. I recognize this, because that's just a transition between two states, right? You have the big card, and then you have the small card, but it's a transition. And yeah, it doesn't run on a click. It runs on dragging, but that's a view transition. So I looked at those things and I said, these are the states. You have the one with the large card, and you have the one with the small card. And this is so cool and so easy to reproduce using CSS Grid, because this is my grid layout for the big card, where you have this meta area, and then you have the title area and some more meta, and you have description and the cover. You give them each a certain height, and then you set the width. There's only one column. And then the change to the small card, well, it's just like adding this extra class to it, .card.small. Now you're small, and changing the grid template, where it says like, oh, the cover photo takes up 2 cells, and then the title goes next to it, and the more meta goes next to it as well. So yeah, that's pretty easy to reproduce, to recreate. So yeah, at that point, I have my 2 layouts. I have built this with CSS, and like, let's add a view transition there, right? Let's do the thing with document.start view transition. Let's start there and then see how we go. So I added that to it. Every time you click on, well, I added it to a button just to test things out. So every time you click on a button, I do document.start view transition, and you toggle the class of small on that specific card. And this is what it looks like. So I have the button there, I click it, And yeah, it toggles between the big card and the small card, but it's just doing a fade in, fade out. And that's happened, well, because of, remember, our user agent style sheet. It says, hey, you know what, the root element, you get the view transition name of root. So we only have this snapshot thing going on. We snapshot the old state, the new state, and we do the fade in, fade out. Stuff is not moving around. Though. What we really want, instead of that fade in, fade out, is we want to have this happen, right? If we click on the button, this should happen. And yes, that is the demo running in Chrome, so it's definitely possible to make that work. And I did it again using the 3-step process that I mentioned to you earlier, which is step 1, identify and name each and every part that you want to move around on screen. So I have my 2 designs again, or my 2 states. I go like, hey, you know what? The thing there on the left, that's the card. On the right, it's also the card. It's a small card, but it's still the card. Then we have our cover photo, and then we have our title, and then we have this back button that's also there, and then yeah, we have this little meta information block, and we also have a few things that are not present on both views. So we have this like description, the avatar, and the controls. These all go away as you go from the big card to the small card. One thing that's important here is that you also need to do this. You also need to identify our tracks list. Because if the browser takes a snapshot without doing this, without giving the tracks list a name, it will fade in, fade out from its old position to its new position. You don't want it just to fade in and fade out. You want it to actually move as you go from the one view to the other. So we also snapshot it individually. And that way we have this little layer with only the cards, with only the tracks, sorry. And then in the new view, it goes upwards. So that was our identify and name type of thing. Then, well, call the view transition API. I already had that. I already had my button there to toggle the thing. And then to make sure everything animates really, really nicely, we need to customize the animations using CSS. And this is the part where it gets tricky, because not all these animations, they run at the same time, or they start at the same time. Like the card, it starts shrinking very early on, but then the title only starts moving after a little while. Like it stays in place for like the first part of the animation, and only then it moves along. So there's some timings that we need to do. Thankfully, Chrome DevTools is very, very helpful here. If you have DevTools open, you toggle the drawer, Shift Command P, you do show animations, you get this animation panel. You hit the pause button, and then if you run an animation, that animation gets paused, and you can click on it, and you can see this little timeline right there. Not only for regular animations, so not only for view transitions, but also for regular animations, and also for scroll-driven animations. We also support these right there. You can see these little panes populate the row, and then if you click on it, you see the timeline. Now, what's really cool is that you can drag it. You can drag through it, yeah, and then you can like scrub through the animation, and here you clearly see it, right? So the card, it starts moving up, but only look at summer vibes only after the card is already moving for a while. Only then the summer vibes thing can move along. So the animation is like a bit, there's some delay on some elements going on here. And this animations panel is so great, by the way. It's really helpful to debug. So yeah, I have these animations here. I see all these groups. So what does a CSS look like? Hang on, this is the tough part. First of all, I have some custom properties that I have defined that define the duration that each component should take. So I'm using a base duration of 1 second because that's really easy to calculate with. So if something is 1000 milliseconds, and then I can say, hey, you know what, this title, you have to wait for the first 60% of that. So for the first 600 milliseconds, and then you can run over a duration of 200 milliseconds. So you see it there on the screen. You have VT title duration 0.6, and you also have VT title delay 0.2. And so we determine all these timings for all these things that we have captured individually when they should run. But the overall duration is 1 second that we make it last. We apply this base duration to all elements. We say, you know what, all the animations you run on 1 second. And we also inherit the delay onto the image pair, the new and the old one. And that's something that got fixed in the user agent style sheet, by the way. So that's no longer needed. We allow clicks on our view transition overlay so that we can like keep on clicking, rage clicking the button. We set up a bunch of keyframes like slide up, slide down, fade in, fade out. And then we add our names to all the components that we have identified. So the root, well, you don't get captured. The card itself, the meta, the title, the more meta, and also there at the bottom, the tracks, we also capture the tracks individually. Then we say, you know what, the card itself, you don't need to fade. Like if it captures the card, you get this black large card, only the black part, because all the stuff inside has also been captured individually. Then you also have the small card, which is also like a black rectangle. Well, we don't want to like fade in, fade out between the black rectangle to another black rectangle. So we say, you know what, you folks, you don't get animations, just render the old one on top. Clip out the overflow from the group because the aspect ratios change. More on that in the documentation. And then we also say like some elements, well, you don't need to animate really, like you don't need to fade in, fade out, because the thing that was snapshotted in the old view and in the new view has the same aspect ratio and the same contents. So we don't want certain animations to run. And then here comes a thing where we use a lot of custom properties where we apply the animation duration and delay to our thing. So for example, where I said like the title should only run after 600 milliseconds for a duration of 200 milliseconds. Well, that's what achieved here using some calcs. This is for the description element, or the description snapshot, I should say. And then, well, we have all these other calculations, which is all the same, until finally at the bottom there, we also have a Z index of -1 on our tracks to make sure that the tracks thing stays underneath the header as it is shrinking. You never know that it would go over it, so we make sure that it stays underneath it. And that's our CSS. And with that, we have it running, right? Here it is again. So we click on it, the button, the animation runs, some things animate later on, and so on. Yeah, this works. Okay, cool. So I have this as a basics, like as the base setup. Like now I know, okay, this thing can actually, it can view transition. But then came the question, like, okay, how can I make this draggable, right? Because in the proof of concept that we saw by Eshan, it didn't just happen by clicking a button. You were clicking and dragging along, and then the view transition ran as you drag. Thankfully, this is pretty easy to achieve because there was some prior art here, thanks to Jake Archibald. Again, he made this demo, which is currently broken in Chrome Stable, by the way, for some reason. I need to figure it out. It's broken in Chrome 124, but it used to work up until including 123, where as you click the little circle thingy, he hijacks that click and he says, you know, as you are dragging along, I want to run a view transition. And you can see that at the top right here, the top left here, sorry, where this demo site, this arrow, like the title moves a bit to the way the arrow comes into view, and then the contents as well. So this is page 1, and then this is page 2. These slide across the screen. So that's the old and the new snapshot, not on top of each other, but sitting next to each other. And as you drag, they show on screen. So Jake built this, which is great for inspiration. And looking at the code, he built this using the Pointer Events API. The Pointer Events API, which is an API that allows you to respond to pointer events, as the name implies. And a pointer is like a mouse clicking or a finger on the screen as well. So it does both mouse clicks and taps from your finger and so on. It works with all types of inputs. And looking at his code, which I then used as inspiration for my code, here's what we basically need to do. So whenever there's a pointer down, so your finger hits the glass or your mouse clicks on the screen, we need to determine the needed drag direction as a first step. So if the card is large, the card needs to shrink, so we need to drag our finger up. And if the card is small at the start, and then we need the card to become large, we need to drag our finger down. So we determine the direction based on whether is the card big or small, and then we determine up or down. And then we also record our start position where we have tapped on screen. Then the next step is as we move our pointer, so as we are moving our finger over the screen, or as while we have clicked, we are dragging around, we record the new position of the pointer. And then if no view transition exists, because the view transition hasn't started at that point, we start a view transition. But the cool thing is that we start the view transition and immediately we get all the animations that are running and we pause the animations. And at that point, we get full control over all the animations because we have paused the animation. The view transition itself won't run to its end state. It will say like, okay, I'm waiting on these animations. Somebody else has control, I guess. I'll just wait. Cool. And as we are dragging, then we say like, okay, we're going to calculate the drag distance. So we start in the middle of the screen. We are dragging up, for example. We calculate how many pixels did we actually drag. And then we use that to update the current time of the animation because we need to drag like for the height of the cover card, basically, right? If it's 800 pixels, we want to drag over 800 pixels to make sure that the card is small. Well, you don't want to drag over 800 pixels. You want to drag over the height of the big card minus the height of the small card because that's the end position. So we want to drag it over a certain distance, and we map that distance to animation time. And then on pointer up, finally, so like say we are dragging and then we stop somewhere halfway. If we release our finger from the screen or if we let go of our mouse, then the animation should be forwards or backwards. Like if you're dragging up, then it should finalize at the small state, or if you're dragging down, it should finalize at the end state. And then when the view transition is actually done, we reset all values and we're ready for the next click. So that's the logic that's being used. And yes, that works. Like here I have a demo. I am clicking with my mouse and I am dragging around. So yeah, it works. I won't show you all of the code. I will only show you two things, namely how to start a view transition, hijack all the animations and pause them. This is the code that you need to do that. So you call document.start view transition, but you store the result in active view transition, which is the name of a property, the name of it's just a variable name that we are giving it. So we are storing it in the active view transition property. We are waiting until it has captured all snapshots. So that's await active view transition.ready. And once that's done, like the animations are ready to run. And when that has happened, we say, hey, you know what? Document, give me all your animations. And I'm going to check which one that are attached to a pseudo element that starts with : view transition. If that's the case, it's an animation that is linked to the view transition because only one view transition can happen at the same time, right? So we know that, okay, when this is the case to that pseudo element, you know it's an animation of the view transition. And then at the last line, we say, you know what, all these animations that we have extracted, pause. From now on, we are taking over control. And the second part that I want to highlight is where we update the current time. So basically what we do is we have the view transition base duration, which is 1000 milliseconds, which we already had. We have our drag distance, which isn't the height of the big card. It's the height of the big card minus the height of the small card. And then we calculate how far you have dragged, and then we map that to computed time. And what's interesting here as well is that we take that computed time and then we clamp it between 0 and the maximum duration. And the reason why we do that is that if we overshoot the duration, so if we reach 1000 milliseconds, an animation by itself will go to its finished state. And a view transition says, if all my animations are finished, then I am also finished. And we want to prevent that because you can drag and then you can drag up again. So you don't want it to finish once you reach the end state. While you are dragging, it should always be running. And only when you're letting go of the cursor, then it can play forward. So we have computed the time here, and then we set that on each and every animation. And that's how we make this thing draggable. So yeah, here it is again. Like click and drag, but there's something weird though going on. Like I have clicked and dragged and the thing moved, but oh yeah, now I need to use my mouse cursor because on desktop, the click and the drag, well, it only works for I hijack it to shrink the card. But if I click and drag again, well, it doesn't really work. So I need to combine drag and scroll on desktop, because on desktop you scroll using your mouse wheel or your touchpad, and you don't do it by clicking and dragging. Also, to be 100% honest with you, the code that I just showed you, it doesn't actually work on a touch device, um, which is very, very unfortunate. And the reason for that is that um, you are battling, basically. You are battling between touching and dragging on the touch device. Should that one do the view transition, or should that do like the scrolling as you do on a touch device? So you can work around it by saying like, okay, I'm adding touch action none to my document, but that then disables, well, touch dragging itself on your touch device, which is not what you want. So then you can say like, okay, I can restore it by mapping drag to scroll. So if I click and drag and the view transition is finished, it doesn't need to run, and I map that to a scroll thingy where I change the scroll top. But that then feels so uncanny because like you lose things like momentum scrolling, like you can't fling on the screen anymore because that's always lost. So at that point, I'm like, whoa, was this even a good idea to begin with? Because I tried to have this draggable view transition, and it's working on a desktop, but it's, yeah, I have to combine scroll and drag, and then it's not working on a touch device. And well, yeah, also, why did it work in Jake's demo? Because I tried Jake's demo on my Android and on an iPhone, and on an Android because that's where Chrome runs, the real Chrome runs, and that one works on the touch device. So it was like, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Um, hmm, Bit of a problem. By the way, if you do want to know why Jake's demo works, because his demo doesn't combine drag and scroll. Only if you click on the gray thingy, the only thing that's intended to happen with it is that you want to drag it around. It doesn't do the native scrolling anymore. Um, so yeah, I think I'm a bit at a dead end right here. I hit like the end of the alley, and now I have to go back. So then I said like, hey, you know what? Instead of this dragging, like maybe I was misguided a bit by the prototype, because the prototype the by Ezon showed you that he clicked and he dragged. So maybe I was a bit misguided by that. Um, what if there was like something that just allowed me to do it in a different way? And then I thought, well, let's try scroll-driven animations, right? Because scroll-driven animations, they are animations driven by scroll. And how do you scroll on a desktop? Well, using your mouse or a touchpad, or using the arrow keys if you want. How you scroll on a touch device? By hitting the screen and moving your finger up and down. So let's try scroll-driven animations. Scroll-driven animations, if you're not familiar with it, this is something that's supported in Chrome 1.15. It's not supported in the other browsers yet. There's a partial implementation in Firefox. Safari has some things regarding to it, but nothing really workable right now. And scroll-driven animations, well, these allow you to have animations. You drive them by scroll, and these run off the main thread. So they run off the main thread when they are animating properties that can be animated off the main thread. That's like the asterisk with that. So if you're changing like a transform, for example, or an opacity, that will actually animate off the main thread. And you don't need any JavaScript for it. So you can use JavaScript because it has a CSS interface that you can use, and it has a JavaScript way of working with it. But you can do it all just from within CSS. And a typical example is this one right here, where I have this little progress bar, this reading indicator at the top of my page. And as I scroll up and down, the reading indicator moves along. And this is the code. Well, it doesn't have the scroll-driven animation yet, but this is the code, basically. I have this progress bar at the top, and the scale X is 0. And by the time it's at the end, the scale X is 1. And it's position fixed at the top. It stays there. So you want to, like, we don't want to run this on the document timeline, which is the default timeline that each animation uses. We want it to run using a different type of timeline, and namely a scroll progress timeline or a scroll timeline. So we don't want to run it by the tick of a clock, 0 seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds, and so on. No, we want to run that animation as we scroll from top to bottom. So as we are at the top of the scroller, it's 0%. If you are at the bottom of that scroll, we have reached 100%, and we want to map that to the animation progress. It also works for horizontal scrollers. It works for the root scroller. It works for any type of scroller. So that's the scroll timeline that we want to use. And to do that in CSS, it's really easy. It's so easy. You have the animation timeline property, which is a new type of property. And then you have the scroll function, which creates a scroll timeline. You combine the two. You say, hey, you know what? You think there, your animation timeline is now this scroll timeline. And a scroll timeline, by default, it will look up the nearest ancestor scroller and track it in the block direction. But you take that declaration, you put it in your CSS. You also remove the 1 second there because it has no meaning. You can leave it in there, but I removed it. And well, and that's that moment when you do that, it works. You have created a scroll-driven animation. You have taken the existing CSS animation, you removed the duration from it, and you set animation timeline scroll, and it works by scrolling a scroller. Um, However, we can use this, right, for our scroll-driven. Now, for this scroll-driven view transition, we don't want to track like the entire scroller. We want to track only a part of it, a part of that scroll timeline. So we don't want to track it from the 0 to the 100% at the bottom. Like only if you are scrolling the first part of the page, then we want the cart to shrink, and after that the page should scroll regularly. Well, for that we can use the animation range property. Animation range normal, which is the default range, that's a shorthand for animation range start normal and animation range end normal. And these default values for a scroll timeline happen to be 0 and 100%. So it tracks the scroller as you scroll from the 0% scroll offset to the 100% scroll of the most the highest scroll offset that you can reach for that scroll. Now the cool thing is that the percentages that you see there, you can put any length percentage in there. So you can do something like 100 pixels, 50 VH. As I scroll this scroller, starting at the 100 pixels scroll offset, if I scroll it for 100 pixels, then the animation should start, and then the animation should stop when I have scrolled over a distance of 50 VH, then it should stop. So you can do that. And for the header that I had there, well, the values are not 100 pixels, 50 VH, they are 0 pixels, and then the height of the card. So that's when we want this view transition or this animation to run. Cool. But now it's like, okay, this is CSS. We're doing a bunch of JavaScript stuff because we are starting the view transition from within JavaScript and whatnot. So easiest way is to like also use JavaScript for the scroll driven part. So I'm gonna need JavaScript. Well, it's also possible, and it's also really easy in JavaScript to create a scroll driven animation. You create a new scroll timeline that tracks a certain scroller. So it's the same concept. You create a scroll timeline. You use that timeline on the animation, and then you set the range start and the range end to some values, and there you have the code. And then of course we need to adjust the range start and range end values, but we have it. At this point, you might be like, dude, that's a lot of info. Yes, I know. Sorry about that, because this is basically like 2 talks in one. I give you the good stuff about view transitions. I give you the good stuff about scroll-driven animations. But fear not, for scroll-driven animations specifically, I have this website. It's called scroll-driven-animations.style. It contains a bunch of demos that you can check out. It also contains a bunch of tools. And on every page at the bottom right, take a good look. You have this little info icon there that you can click. So you can read a description of what this demo does, how it works. I explained the code to you. Then you also have a little switcher icon that you can change to various versions. So you can change between CSS and JavaScript, but also sometimes I solve something with a scroll timeline or a view timeline. There's like various approaches that you can take. So this website, it has all the information. And also, as something new for you, I have good news. I've been working on a free video course about scroll-driven animations. You will be able to check it out at the link shown on screen, because it's not live yet. The editors are doing a lot of hard work to finalize the edits, and we are going to launch it in the first week of May normally. So if you check that link again, or if you go to scroll-driven-animations.style in the first week of May, I will include the videos with the whole video course for you to check out. If you check out, it's 10 full episodes. If you check it out, you will know all there is that you need to know about scroll-driven animations. Okay, so back to our header that we had. Like we have this card. It needs to shrink. I know that the dragging stuff, that's a dead end. So let's do the scroll-driven animation thing. Like version 0, right? Proof of concept. Can this actually work? Like we have it on paper, but can this work? You have the pieces of the puzzle. So the plan is I create a scroll timeline. I hook the view transitions, their animations, their timeline, and hook it to that created scroll timeline. Stuff happens and it works, right? So here's the code for that. I take the card height, I take the small card height, I create my new scroll timeline, and I track it on a certain axis. That's what I need to do. Then the point where we take all the animations. So remember where we like sniffed out all the animations that start with that are attached to a pseudo element that start with colon view transition. And instead of pausing these animations, we don't pause them. We say no. Animation.timeline, you are now hooked to the scroll timeline, and we also set the range start and the range end, and then it will work, right? Right? Well, right, yeah, it does work. As I scroll, like this is actually working, right? And it also works on a mobile device, on a touchy device. One problem though, once I have paused the scroll driven animation, like it ends, and then again that's a problem where which I mentioned earlier. Like if all the animations of a view transition have reached the finished state, then the view transition goes like, I'm done. And then we have a problem here, like once we reach that certain scroll offset again, it doesn't restart. So I needed to add some extra code, like restart the view transition when back in the range. When we are back at the top of the page, there we should restart the view transition. So change of plans, I added an extra step in there. You monitor the scroll offset to start the view transition and range. It looks like this. So as we scroll, I'm using a scroll listener here. If the scroll top is between two certain values, then we start the view transition. If it's outside of the values and there's still an active view transition, we skip it, we stop it. So we have this code. Do note I also needed to add something extra in there. Like I needed to detect if we need to play the reverse animations, yes or no. Like if you're going from the top to the bottom, then you have the normal animation direction. But if you're coming from the bottom of the page to the top, the animations basically need to play in reverse. So I needed some extra code there where I do animation.reverse. Yeah, that's also needed. So here I detect this using like, is the card small? Yes or no? Then it's reverse or not. We do animation not reverse, and then here when the view transition is finished, we make sure that the card is in the correct state. It's in the small state or in the not small state, in the big state. And here we have it. I scroll the page. Yeah, it works. I go beyond it, and when I enter it again, the view transition starts again. Cool. One thing with this though is that like you can stop scrolling, and then you have this half header, like half high header, like what ideally it would just like snap to either end. Like either the card is big or the card is small. So again, some extra code. I want to keep the document interactive. So I snap to either one of the things, and then the view transition stops all by itself. So again, an extra step. We snap to one of both states. And scroll snapping, well, it happens to be something that CSS is very good at. So let's do that. It is a bit hacky though, because with view transitions, the problem is that if you have the snapshots taken, the DOM underneath will already be the new one. So on the screen, you can still see the old snapshot, while the DOM underneath is already the new snapshot. So we have to cater a bit for that, because if the card is small and you're snapping to the small card, it's different when snapping to the big card. So I needed to inject some extra pseudo elements. Basically what I do is I inject extra pseudo elements that take over the height of the big card and the height of all the tracks. Yeah, very, very annoying code. But they are sized to the large card. So here's a representation, like with the small card, but the card already being small, I am hovering over the pseudo here. You see that the injected pseudo basically takes up the area of the large card, which is needed for the snapping to happen. And how do I get these heights? Well, custom properties are great, because custom properties, you can manipulate them from JavaScript. So I read the values in JavaScript, I inject it into my CSS, and then the CSS does its thing with it. And here I have it. So if I scroll and I let go, then it either snaps to the collapsed state or it snaps to the not collapsed state. Wow. I wasn't 100% happy with this yet, because right now I'm mixing scroll-driven animations with scroll events, and like the key behind scroll-driven animations is like, yeah, but you basically use it because it can run off the main thread, but then your scroll code, well, that is main thread code. So I'm like mixing both, which isn't good. So I try like, hey, can I do this using only scroll events? And can I do this using only scroll driven animations? So I have a version that only uses scroll events. The plan is you monitor the scroll offset, you pause the animations like we did with the dragging, and you update the current time. The same logic as with the dragging version, and snapping again using CSS. That's also code that I've already shared. And then this here again is the code. Like as I scroll, if I'm between the range, I start a view transition. If one is already running, I update the animations based on the current scroll offset. And yes, this also works here with the snapping and all. This is also a viable path to the solution. I tried something else, but I hit a dead end. I won't bother you with it. Sometimes you hit dead ends. You have to give up. And then I also tried like the one with only the scroll timeline. And here's a trick that I do for it. I set up a fake animation and I track that one. So that's the plan. I set up a fake animation that has a scroll timeline, and that animation is attached to only a certain sub range of the full range. And then I track the progress of the effect. And when we are in that range 0 to 1, I update the view transition. If we are outside of it, and I stop the view transition. And again, we do the snapping. And this is how you create a fake animation. You do document element. So I'm animating the root element here. And I'm saying opacity, you are going from 1 to 1, which doesn't have a visual effect. But I am attaching it to a scroll timeline with a certain range attached. So that animation that just runs, it can run on the compositor because it's animating opacity. And what I then do is I track the progress of that animation. For that, I have written a utility function. It's called track progress. It's in a package. You can install it through npm. It says basically, hey, when you are in range, start the view transition. If none is running, otherwise update the animations. And if you are outside of the range, skip the transition. So it's the same type of logic with the scroll events only one, except that it's a bit different here. It's tracking the animation progress of the animation, the fake animation with the scroll timeline attached to it. And yes, this also works. This works on desktop, and this works on your touch device as well. Chrome on Android, it also works there. So at this point, you might be, okay, you've shown us like 3 approaches. Which one should I use? And well, if my colleague Barry were here, he would say like, we need to talk about performance, because these all have implications on performance. The one with the scroll listeners, V0 and V1, well, they run on the main thread, the scroll listeners, so that's not really feasible. And then also the one that I built with the fake scroll-driven animation, well, that one also runs on the main thread because I am using a request animation frame. And in that request animation frame, I'm using get computed timing. And the problem is that once you have a request animation frame running on your page, all animations, including the ones that run on the compositor, rerun again on the main thread. And the logic is there that inside of your request animation frame, you could be reading a property somewhere. So if you're animating opacity from 0 to 1, in your ref, you could ask, hey, what's the opacity of this element at this very point? That could be 0.5, for example, halfway in between. So the request animation frame basically says like, all your compositor animations, they're out of the picture. Well, they still run, but they are then duplicated on the main thread again. So this isn't really great, what I built there. To be fair with you and to be honest with you, this request animation frame stuff, which I used, is a hack. And that will be replaced in the future with native progress events on the effect. So that's something that we are working on with the CSS working group. I think it's landed in the spec by now, to have progress events on the effect, and then you don't have the problem that you need to use a request animation frame, so it can be composited. So yeah, in summary, scroll-driven view transitions. So you have scroll-driven animations, cool, they work. You have view transitions, cool, they work, they're amazing. What if you combine them? Yes, you can combine them. You hijack all the view transition animations. You manipulate the animations, either by pausing them or adding them to a different timeline, and then you update the current time somehow. And also, this is very hacky. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this right now. And with that, well, I'm at the end of this deck. Haha. I see people. Thank you, thank you. So yeah, maybe it's a bit of like a low to end with, but I found it an interesting experiment, because yes, this is viable, and yes, we need ways to make this better in the future. And it's great to see that there's already some solutions being thought of, like within the CSS working group, but also within Chrome engineering. Like I've shown this to engineering, and they're like, "Oh yeah, sure, we definitely need to add some optimizations or some extra APIs or whatever that you can use, so that this is performant in the future." So it might be a bit too early for scroll-driven view transitions, but maybe in the future. I think that's a nice thought.